Hello and welcome dear students. Today our topic for deliberation is North Indian and Deccan social transformations, Varna, caste and gender. The main objectives of this lecture are: number 1, to know about the process of social transformation in Deccan. Number 2, to know about the influences from North and their impact on the social setup of Deccan. And finally, to know about Varna, caste and gender in South Indian context. Now, let's start with the introduction. According to the Dharmashastra texts of this period, the 4 Varnas and the ashrams remained the pillars of Brahmanical doctrine. The old notion of ashrams as alternative pathways was supplemented by the notion of them as consecutive phases. Yavanas and other outsiders were integrated into the Varna system and accounted for by the Varna Samaskar concept, which means the mixture of Varnas. The Yavanas were characterized as the children of Kshatriya man and Shudra woman in the early Dharma Sutras. The Mahabharata identifies them variably as the sons of Yayati, as being created from the sage Yashistha's cow in order to annihilate Vishwamitra's army as Shudras. The Manusmriti identifies them as Vitriya Kshatriya, or Kshatriya who were degraded for failing to conduct sacrifice ceremonies. These references reveal a conflict between social inclusion and exclusion. Jati, lineage and occupation remained critical indicators of social identity. The texts do not provide evidence regarding the operations of caste in detail. However, they do indicate a preference for endogamy and the heredity components in vocations. There are also references to the members of the same profession residing in separate communities or in distant areas of the communities. As for limits on giving and receiving food, texts focus mostly on individuals at the top of the caste hierarchy, that is Brahmanas, and those thought to be outside the caste system, that is Chandalas. The Manusmritis discuss Chandalas in greater details than early texts. Some of its remarks are a continuation of what previous lawgivers had to say, but the complete segregation of this group stands out. Chandala will reside outside the village. Upon the king's command, he may enter a village or a town to execute given duties, but he must be identifiable by marks. He is an apatra, meaning that food for him must be placed on the ground and he can't eat from other people's dish. Several Jataka tales indicate that Manusmriti's injections about untouchability were consistent with prevalent social norms. In these tales, the Chandalas are shown as a hated group who lived in isolated villages and whose sights and touch were seen as contamination by others. They consisted of body removers, cremators, thieves, executioners, sweepers, public performers, hunters and fruit vendors. Extreme prejudice against Chandal are also seen in Jaina scriptures. The existence of jati or the caste division and hierarchies did not necessarily imply that the system was always rigid. There are indicators of a degree of social mobility, such as the acknowledgement accorded to the children of unequal marriage. The Buddhasala Jataka recounts how Prasenjit, king of Kosala, was enraged when he found that the Sakyas had fooled him into marrying the daughter of a Sakya prince by a slave woman. The king rejected his wife and son, but he took them back when the Buddha reminded him that the mother's family was unimportant. Only the father's family mattered. There is a Jataka story about a prince who served as an apprentice to a potter, basket maker, florist, cook during the course of love affair. Other tales include a prince who became a merchant and a young person from a noble family who became an archer. Brahmanas are shown as engaging in commerce, living as hunters and trappers, cultivating land, working as cowherds, etc. Obviously, these are all examples of individuals from a higher social class pursuing occupations from the lower classes. Few examples exist of a lower status during achieving successful upward social mobility. There was a direct connection between caste and household roles and the relationships particularly between men and women. This period's text features a number of seemingly contradicting views about the woman. The Manusmriti, for example, alternatively praises and condemns women. Olively argues that the character of the assertion varies based on the topic under discussion. When discussing how men should protect their wives, women are depicted as lusty, fickle, heartless, and entirely untrustworthy. In contrast, while discussing how men should respect a woman, women are referred as blessing bearer and Shri, which means the goddess of good fortune in the house. Where the conversation is about how men must not mistreat women, Manu asserts that the gods are pleased when women are respected, and where they are not, no ritual is successful. The Manusmriti emphasizes the husband's power over his wife and her property. Nevertheless, it also claims that the wife can't be sold or discarded, nor can she be treated as property, because she is a gift from the god and not a commodity like cattle and money. The husband is also expected to support his wife in all conditions, provided she is faithful. Besides, from specific remarks and the situations in which they are made, it is crucial to recognize the large societal and the family roles and structures emphasized in works like Manusmriti. The period's Dharmashastra texts illustrate in a variety of ways the strengthening of patriarchal nature of the family and the growing subjugation of women. Women treated from the public life, their access to knowledge decreased and their dependence on the male kin grew. Women were more consigned to the home sphere, while the desires for boy or girls increased. The increased emphasis on chastity reflected the rising constraints on their sexuality. Marriages before the puberty were one way to ensure this. Vijayanath has investigated the shifting ties between the woman and property in Brahmanical writings from the period of Rigveda to 5th and 6th century CE. She claims that by the period of the Smritis and Puranas, woman has been degraded to a position of near total subjugation and servitude and were viewed as property on par with Shudras. In the early Dharma Sutras, women had a low priority among claimants to inherit property. But according to Nath, around the 2nd century BCE, the lawgivers acknowledged and prescribed women's inheritance rights. However, it should be remembered that this only applies to the Sitridana. According to the Manusmriti, there are 6 kinds of Sitridanas. Those received before the nuptial fire, in the wedding procession, as a mark of love by her father-in-law and mother-in-law, and her brother, mother, or father. It did not, however, cover inherited property or property gained through a woman's own labor. Regular property rights remained mostly governed by patrilineal inheritance regulations. Nath continues her argument by claiming that women's rights to inherit immovable property were greatly acknowledged and increased in the later centuries, that is during Gupta and the post-Gupta periods, in order to protect the family's control over property and prevent it from escheating to the state. The Smriti texts do not address the details of a wedding rites, but they do provide a number of basic remarks about the marriage. The Manusmriti suggests that a Dvija male should marry a female from his own Varna who displays good attributes after completing his education. The urgency to marry of girls as soon as possible was related to higher value placed on keeping female chastity and bearing children. Several Smritis reflect the belief that every menstruating a girl experience represents a lost opportunity to conceive. This was equated to the murder of an embryo, means Bhruna Hatya, in contrast to the early Dharma Sutras, which states that the female should marry upon reaching puberty. Consequent writers pushed for her marriage before the puberty. According to Mano, a 30-year-old man should marry a 12-year-old girl, whereas 24-year-old man should marry an 8-year-old girl. In addition to the young age of brides, this prescription predicts a significant age difference between the bride and husband. The Manusmriti, like other Dharmashastra works, prefer that marriage takes place inside the Varna, but recognizes the presence of inter-Varna unions and approves of Anhuluma, which means hypogamous ones. The Manusmriti suggests that, like a river that flows into the sea, a married lady acquires the characteristics of her husband. However, the mixing of Varnas that resulted from Prathaloma marriage was condemned as leading to chaos and destruction, and the king was ordered to prevent it. The Manusmriti, unlike the Budayana Dharma Sutra, vehemently disapproves of a man marrying his maternal uncle's daughter or paternal aunt's daughter. It also disapproves of the selling of daughter, that is, the acceptance of a bride price, but lays forth specific guidelines for circumstances that may arise as a result of this activity. For instance, it claims that if a male is shown a particular female and then offered another female, he can marry both of them for the same amount. According to Manusmriti, husbands may abandon their wives if their wives is notorious, suffering with an illness, addicted on the drink, cruel, treacherous, insubordinate, barren, acceptant theft, or harsh in speech. The text outlines the length of a time a man should wait before leaving a wife with such flaws. The passage indicates that a barren woman should be abandoned in the 8th year, one whose children die in 10th year, and one who has only produced female offsprings in the 11th year. However, a wife who speaks rudely should be abandoned immediately. In contrast, it is said elsewhere that an ill but virtuous wife who cares of her husband should never be humiliated or abandoned, and that her husband should only take another wife with her permission. The Yajnavalkya Smriti states that if a man divorces his first wife and remarries, he must take care of her or he will commit sin. In the Dharma Shastra, there are more signs of the prevalence of polygamy, such as the discussion of the property rights of a man's son from multiple wives. In fact, lifelong monogamy is portrayed as the ideal for women. The Manusmriti opposes the remarriage of widow. It argues that a daughter should not be married more than once. On the other side, it refers to the Punarbhava, elsewhere as the son of a woman who has remarried due to widowhood, abandonment, or her own desire. In the Manusmriti, temporal self-denial and celibacy for widow in the early Dharma Sutras are replaced by lifetime restrictions. A woman, when her husband is dead, may, if she chooses, emaciate her body by subsisting on flowers, roots, and the fruits, but she should not even take the name of a male stranger. Till her death, she should be forbearing, observe vows, be celibate, and should hanker after that preeminent code of conduct that is prescribed for women devotees to their husbands. On her husband's death, if a virtuous woman abides by the rules of celibacy, she goes to heaven even if she is sonless. The Manusmriti describes Niyogya as Pushyadharma, a disgusting behavior. However, it specifies particular protocols that must be performed if Niyoga is to be utilized. According to the Manusmriti, if a woman's husband dies after Kanyadan, his younger brother must marry her and combine with her once a month until a son is born. The text identifies a son born from a Niyoga union as Kshatraraja, literally born on the field, that is the women. While the Dharmashastra texts provide a number of prescriptions for the ideal role of women from upper echelons of society, other texts introduce us to women from diverse backgrounds with a variety of professions. In the Pali Jatakas, in addition to queens, nuns, and the courtesans, there are women linked with the varieties of jobs including basket weaving and dyeing. When we examine non-textual material, particularly inscriptions from various subcontinental regions, our understanding of gender relations strengthened even more. Some individual documents the activities of royal women. For example, the royal women of the Satavahana line are prominent in the epigraphic record and acted independently when giving donations. Some Satavahana monarchs also used metronymous names like Gautamiputra and Visheshthaputra. Shows the king adopted his mother's Gotra. In the Brahmanical system, Gotra is not inherited from mother but rather from the father. Therefore, the evidence of kings called after their mothers is significant, but it's not necessarily evidence of metronymy or even matrilineal. Metronymous may have served as a means of determining parenthood in a polygamous setting, or they may be indicative of the frequency of marriage arrangements that the Brahmanical traditions deemed inappropriate. The employment of the same metronymy by the multiple rulers suggests the idea that certain Satavahana kings engaged in marriage between cousins. A Nasik inscription, which appears to be a replica of an inscription issued by Gautamiputra Satkarni and his mother, identifies the composer as Lota, a female Pratiharakshi, which means a doorkeeper. Numerous royal and aristocratic ladies figure as donors in Ikshwa period inscription at Nagarjun Kunda. Various non-royal women activities are also revealed via inscriptions. Such ladies emerge frequently as donors at Buddhist sites. Less research has been conducted on the evidence of a corresponding high incidence of female patronage in favor of Jaina establishments. These examples do not necessarily reveal anything specific about inheritance norms. However, they do indicate that some women held influence over the economic resources of their households. If we wish to locate women from this time period, we must go beyond the words contained in the texts and inscriptions and into the realm of images. However, the sculptures of this era depict numerous facets of women and femininity. Now, dear students, let us discuss social differences and the framework of caste. As we are aware with the term caste, which refers to a group of social classification arranged hierarchically. In the Dharma Sutras and Dharma Shastras, the perfect order is described. Brahmanas asserted that this social order in which they held the highest position was divinely decreed, while placed Shudras and untouchables at the bottom. Supposedly, positions within the hierarchy were decided by birth. Now, let's discuss the right occupation. The Dharma Sutras and Dharma Shastras also detailed the ideal occupations for each of the four Varnas. Like, Brahmanas were expected to study and teach the Vedas, perform and receive sacrifices, give and receive gifts, and study and teach the Vedas. Kshatriyas were required to fight in battle, guard and administer justice, study the Vedas, offer sacrifices, and give gifts. In addition to agriculture, pastoralism, and the commerce, the Vaishyas were also expected to engage in the final three occupations. The single occupation allotted to Shudra was serving the three higher Varnas. 2 or 3 ways for upholding these principles were developed by the Brahmins. One was to maintain that the Varna order has to be divine origin, as we have shown. Secondly, they recommended rulers to guarantee these standards were adhered to within their respective kingdoms. Thirdly, they aimed to convince individuals that their standing was defined by birth. Nevertheless, This was not always simple. Thus, prescriptions were frequently supported by anecdotes from the Mahabharata and other scriptures. Now, dear students, let's discuss non-Kshatriya kings. The Shastra states that only Kshatriyas were able to rule as kings. Nevertheless, the roots of a number of significant ruling dynasties were likely distinct. The socio-economic origins of the Mauryas, who governed a vast empire, has been the subject of heated controversy. Later Buddhist literature stated that they were Kshatriyas, although Brahmanical scriptures identified their ancestry as poor. Brahmanas were the Sangas and Kanavas, the direct successors of the Mauryas. In reality, political power was practically accessible to anybody who could muster the necessary money and support and rarely depend on being born as Kshatriya. Other kings, such as the Central Asian Shakas, were viewed by the Brahmins as Malichas, barbarians or outsiders. However, one of the earliest Sanskrit inscriptions narrates how the most famous Saka emperor Rudradaman renovated Sudarshan Lake. This indicates that mighty Malichas were acquainted with Sanskrit traditions. Gautami Putra Sri Satkarni, the most well-known ruler of the Satvana dynasty, claimed to be both a unique Brahman, means Ikka Brahman, and a killer of Kshatriya pride. He also claimed to have prevented intercaste marriages between members of 4 Varnas. Subsequently, he engaged in a marriage partnership with Rudradaman's family. This case demonstrated that assimilation within the context of caste was frequently a difficult task. The Satvanas asserted that they were Brahmins, whereas the Brahmins believed that kings should have been Kshatriyas. They professed to defend the fourfold Varna order, but they formed matrimonial alliances with individuals who were excluded from the system. And as we have seen, they practiced endogamy as opposed to the Brahmanical texts recommended exogamous system. Now, dear students, let's discuss about jatis and social mobility. Jati, another term employed in literature to allude to social categories, reflects these ambiguities. Jati, like Varna in Brahmanical doctrine, was founded on birth. However, while the number of Varnas was fixed at 4, the number of Jatis was unrestricted. In fact, whenever Brahmanical authorities encountered new groups such as forest dwelling, nishadas, or wished to give a name to an occupational categories that did not easily fit into the fourfold Varna system, they classed them as Jatis. Jatis who shared a profession or occupation were occasionally recognized in the sirnis or guilds. Occasionally do we encounter documents that details the histories of these groups. There are, however, exceptions. The inscriptions provide a fascinating look at intricate social processes and shed light on the nature of guilds or the sirnis. Despite the fact that the membership was contingent on a shared occupational specialization, some members pursued other professions. In addition, these suggest that the members shared more than an occupation. Now, dear students, let us discuss beyond the prisms of 4 Varnas. Integration. Due to the diversity of the subcontinent, there has always been a population whose social practices were not affected by Brahmanical concepts. When they are mentioned in Sanskrit scriptures, they are frequently described as strange, barbaric, or even animal-like. In some cases, these individuals were the forest dwellers for whom hunting and gathering was essential sustenance activities. This includes categories like as the Nishadas, to which Eklavya is said to have belonged. Populations such as the nomadic pastoralists, who could not be easily accommodated within the framework of settled agriculturalists, were looked with distrust. Sometimes those who spoke non-Sanskrit languages were labeled as Malichas and regarded with contempt. Nonetheless, there was also an exchange of ideas and opinions among us to these individuals. Several stories in the Mahabharata revealed the nature of relationships. So dear students, it was all about today's lecture regarding North Indian and Deccan social transformations. Hope you have understood it well. See you next time with a new topic. Till then, take care and goodbye.